All right, thank you for joining me today, Mimi.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you talk a little bit about Picasso in this exhibit?
Yeah, this is a big exhibit to come through Toronto. It's already been to some other destinations, including obviously America, Australia, and it's works from his private collection. So that means Picasso, he has an enormous, vast output. They estimate about 50,000 works, and at the time of his death, there were thousands of them in his estate, and so they were used as the foundation for some museums and galleries which are dedicated to Picasso. And what happens is those museums and galleries, they then lend them out or loan them out to go on tour. And so what we're getting at the AGO is a selection of things that were still owned by him at the time of his death, and many of them are fairly personal, so they're intimate. So some of them will include portraits of his family members, so people he had relationships with, friends, etc., and obviously his explorations with various types of art movements that he interacted with over the years.
Okay. You have an interesting relationship with Picasso yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
Well, my relationship with Picasso is a product of my undergraduate experience. So I went through the University of Toronto's art history program, and there were some really top-notch scholars there. And one of the things we learned is critical thinking. So it's not just a buzzword, critical thinking. And so the whole idea is we learned about critiquing earlier art movements and their leaders, their iconic figures, and how to do so effectively without just looking at things on the surface. So to go below the surface and say, sure, it looks like that, but what does that actually mean? And what does that say about the artist or about the time in which they were living? And so from this, I learned really quickly that I can't stand Picasso, and that he is a product of the environment in which he was raised and educated. And that environment was remarkably racist and incredibly sexist, and that comes through loud and clear in his work.
Okay. People don't really understand the backstories of some artists' pieces like they did a long time ago.
Yeah.
Do you think that influences the popularity of an artist?
Yes, most definitely. The fact that there will be a younger generation of people who will go to the AGO because when they were growing up, their parents said, ooh, Picasso, he's amazing, he's an icon. And of course, that is clearly reflected in his auction prices today. So he remains like an A-list force. If you look at, you know, the top-rated artists in terms of their value overall, there's actually entire private art mutual funds and art indexes that track the performance of specific artists over time as a collectible, and he's always ranked in the top 1, 2, or 3 with people like Jackson Pollock. So if you're told by your parents and then by society as a whole that this is somebody valuable and important, there's a decent chance you're not going to walk in off the street and instantly question what you're seeing. You're going to say, wow, this is exactly like what I'm sure it's supposed to be like, and then just leave it at that. So unless you come into the gallery with a lot of critical thinking tools, you're probably not going to walk away with having learned in any way, shape, or form anything that is moving you outside of the realm of popular opinion about Pablo Picasso.
Okay. How has his art influenced other artists as well and this market, as you're mentioning?
Well, he had a profound influence. It had a lot to do with the fact that when he was living in Paris, he lived in Paris just after the turn of the century, fin de siècle, Paris. So he was one of those places that was the place to be, and his friends included people like Matisse and André Drégrain. Like you can kind of go on and on and on with all of the people he interacted with. He had an interesting relationship, for instance, with Man Ray, who came from America, or with Salvador Dali, who was also from Spain. And so what they did is when they hung out together, they would all argue, and then they would put on shows together, or they would write manifestos which confronted each other. And as a result, you can end up with a situation where lots and lots of artists talk about each other or use each other as inspiration in their works, and that helps to cement their position in the art world.
Okay. Can you talk about how these artists have, as you said, Picasso is monopolizing the market with high prices, and can you talk about that, the high price market and the value of art today?
Okay, so behind the scenes, museums and galleries, they need people to come in off the street and pay admission to be able to stay open, and they have to be remaining as institutions which represent cultural taste. So if they're going to be cultural taste and arbiters of what good taste is, they have to make sure that people buy into that. And one way is to make sure that they have objects in their collections which everybody believes or has bought into the idea of being very important works, so canonical works. So in the case of somebody like Picasso, If you buy into that, and people have been buying into that since, like in 1940, the Museum of Modern Art had a retrospective on Picasso. In 1940. So let's do some basic math. We're talking 70 years later, and Pablo Picasso is still the subject of retrospectives around the world. And that means that for a long period of time, multiple generations have been buying his works as something that is collectible, that has withstood the test of time. So if you want to buy art as an investment, you're going to go for the safe names, the brand names, and Picasso is a brand. So you can buy t-shirts, mouse pads, aprons, you name it, it's all out there. And of course, there's a huge market for everything that is licensed from his estate, which is prints, so collectibles, so you can get people in at all different price points. And artists who lived after Picasso, when they look back on him, they say, wow, I want to have my name attached to a movement which is canonical and which draws in all different types of buyers from around the world. And so once a bunch of rich people own something, when they make an investment, when a rich person makes an investment, like in the stock market, let's say you go into the stock market, do you want to buy Microsoft if you think it's going to tank? No, you want to buy Microsoft because you think next year the shares are going to go up 50 bucks. So the whole idea, and I mean per share, obviously. So the whole idea is art is the same thing. The moment that you're talking about institutional investors, so museums and galleries are investing in these artists, and then rich people, when they buy into those mutual funds, they're buying those artists, or they're putting them in their personal collections. They have a vested interest in making sure that those artists maintain their reputations.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much for joining me today, Mimi.
You're most welcome. It was a pleasure.
And back to you.